Group Chief Advisor at Ntiyiso Consulting Group. His name is Andisa Ramavhunga. He's here with me, and we are looking at his journey. And today we're going to focus on the very business that he is both operationally and strategically involved in, and that is the Ntiyiso Consulting Group. And we're going to take that as a model of the process that he has gone through. Good evening to you, Andisa. Are you well this evening?
I'm good, Aubrey.
Excellent, man. I want to start off before we get into the conversation about your current business, together with your partners, the Ntiyiso Consulting Group, and revisit a thought that I think we didn't complete last time we had the conversation. And that is the difference between being self-employed and being a business person. And I know that it can sound like we are messing around with semantics, but I think that there are some real technical differences that we need to be aware of in order for us to understand the difference between those two realities, being self-employed versus being a person in business. Now, you can be in business and be self-employed, but there is, I believe, a difference between being self-employed and then graduating to a place where you are in business. Let's talk about that.
I'm trying to see if I understand you, Aubrey. I think I get the gist of what you're saying.
Yeah.
So maybe first let me start by saying people who are self-employed are naturally in business.
Sure.
I think what you are trying to get to is the area where you say, do I have a business or am I self-employed? I don't know whether I'm making sense,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
A business is something that's able to run when you are not there.
Yeah.
And self-employment, naturally, obviously, you can't. You are the employee, but you're still in business.
Yeah.
Right. I would like to put in the difference, and we've spoken about this word for the longest of time, is scaling a business. Because the only way you can move away from being self-employed to working in your business, because those are subtle differences. Because just because you have got a business does not mean that you can't work in it. I work in my business, but the difference is that I can take two days or 3 days off without that business being impacted. In fact, I could argue I could take longer, but obviously I don't want to take longer. Sure. Because I've got other aspirations. The question that I think you are asking is to say, how do you create something that outlives you?
Yes.
And that's when you say you are in business. If you are self-employed,
something that might not necessarily operationally need you on a day-to-day basis.
In fact, it shouldn't. At some point, not only operationally but strategically, right? Yeah. So you need to put in place the necessary infrastructure that would allow it to get there. And that's the art of scaling that we've always spoken about. Last week we started talking about some of the things that entrepreneurs need to document, right? And this is now, and by the way, to just take a step back, I find it often, or businesses often start with self-employment. I think that one is very critical. And I would also like to distinguish from just being employed. I mean, the difference between just being employed in a business and obviously being self-employed, I think is vast, because not only are you an employee or delivering a service or a craft in your business, but you are supposed to be doing all these other wrapper services that you might not necessarily do in employment. Things like writing out invoices, things like thinking about strategy, things about thinking about operations, thinking about customer experience, thinking about how do you delight and please the customer. Ultimately, self-employment ends up with you taking the ultimate accountability for everything that goes on in the business. Whereas if you're employed, you're somewhat shielded because you can get away with just concentrating on what you are being employed to do. So you are taking accountability for just a small part of your business or operations. But self-employment is a start of a lot of businesses. The question then becomes, how do you scale that business up so that you are not just self-employed, but you are working in your business?
Yeah.
And that business is employing other people, and it can sustain itself whether you are there or not, and thereby creating that legacy.
So let's splice that to your journey into the creation of Ntiyiso Consulting Group.
Yeah.
When does that journey start? And I don't want you to lose track of some of these principles. Scaling, changing from being employed in a business to a systems-run business.
Yeah.
And I'm preempting here. I'm going ahead of myself. Sorry. Talk to me about how and when does that journey start?
So, if you remember the last time we spoke, I was in a process of starting up a TV business. In fact, by the time Ntiyiso came, that process had moved to a greater degree of maturity. Connect was launched and it started hiring people, and then those people went on with the business of television, which is about production, it's about script writing, it's about creativity. But there's also the head office bit that I started to do as well. I was still looking after strategy. I still wrote a lot of the strategy documents or the business models, and as well as forming part of the team that does negotiations. But for all intents and purpose, the operational side of stuff, which I was not qualified to do anyway, we got people to do that, people to write scripts, people to actually be behind cameras, do editing of the content or material that comes in, and do after post-production, it's called. So there were people who did that. So that freed up a lot of my time, whereby I then got into and I'll shorten the story. I then met my current partners, where again we started a business from an opportunistic point of view. You might remember I said that I'm a career management consultant, and when I joined my partners, we were in consulting. They were also somewhat from a career in consulting, right? So we then started this journey. So for all intents and purposes, we did all the work, right? So when I say all the work, is the value chain of the business that comes that word again. So we would go source the work, but we'll then go deliver the work ourselves. There were two of us at the time, and then the third partner would come and join us from time to time. But we did all the work, including invoicing, chasing after invoices, making sure that we get paid, doing salon work, account management. So we were pretty much self-employed, if you were to use the word in a technical sense, in the sense that we were working for ourselves, but it wasn't clear at the start that we were building a business, but it became very apparent very quickly. And again, I'd like to draw ourselves to those principles to say what actually made us work from that time, because I'm remember the whole point of our conversation today, we call it reflections, right? But superimposing that, or reflection rather, on my journey to date, and what worked, and what, if I had an opportunity to relive that life, what would I have changed? So what worked again was getting a strong partnership, a partnership that's based on trust. Culture became a glue for the partners. So one thing I would then urge entrepreneurs to get into, and I know it's not an easy thing to get into, because we are driven by a motive of putting food on the table, but sometimes even the interest of the work that we do. Yeah. But it's quite important to evaluate culturally how you're working as a partnership, because that will determine whether that partnership will last the test of time. Will stand the test of time, rather.
I want to stop you just very quickly there, especially on that word culturally. Yeah. As it pertains to business.
Yes.
Right? Because, somebody's listening to there and thinking culturally, what are we talking about? Aren't we supposed to be having a conversation about business, entrepreneurship, and all of those kinds of things? What do you mean when you say culturally? That is something that needs to be foremost in the minds of anybody that are in business, entrepreneurs. What are you referring to?
Yeah, and I'll practicalize it, because I think this is a very good point. So remember, we had a conversation on culture, but I would like to draw people there if they want to get maybe the technical framework to think about it. But remember, we said those are unwritten rules that we hold each other accountable to. So it's things that we don't actually teach each other, but it's the rules that are somehow socialized in us, but I don't need to test it in the next individual. I'll give you a typical example. I've never had to beg my partners to deliver a piece of work. So it came without question that, hey, if we have got work to do, we have to work throughout the night till 4 o'clock. And no one will disappear, by the way, because again, if you are working with someone and someone disappears because they only do day shifts and not night shifts, again, those are telltale signs to say, but can we really make this work? And not sometimes to say we could not get burned out, right? But whenever those situations arose, they were never in question. I mean, we'll take turns, and the partner will say, I'm tired today. Can I at least push this thing? Can you push it till 12 o'clock at night? I'll make sure that I wake up. Or maybe say 3 o'clock. I'll make sure that I'm up at 3. And then you'll do a handover, and then I'll push it till late. And by the way, this is when technology was still coming through. These work from home technologies were not prevalent at the time. In fact, I remember I used to use a lot of the phone calls. Yeah. But true to form, if 3 o'clock hits, the partner is up. I've been pushing throughout the night. I hand over, I go to sleep as well. But I go to sleep as well knowing that work is in good hands. So it's,
you're talking about work ethic.
Work ethic.
In that particular issue, which would be a component of the culture that you're talking about.
It's just that the word work ethic will presuppose that if you don't work at night, you don't have the work ethic. And I don't want people to say that. But it's about us understanding each other around what are the boundaries. And what are the absolute yes of the relationships and the absolute no-nos. Things like, I can't read sloppy work. So we all have to have attention to detail. That would go without fail. Being a slogger for detail and looking at the formatting of documents, we all had that a skill. So we never really assumed from each other. Not to say if it wasn't there, it would have been a deal breaker, but I think the way we worked with each other, we're quite aware of each other's strengths and weaknesses. If that thing were to become a problem, it would have been a problem that's probably being addressed up front rather than us having to wait till we get to the client to see it. So trust was very important. The ability to trust each other implicitly without even, because it was a high-pressured environment, so I could push maybe the whole day till midnight. And my partners, Alex and Mielani, will then pick up at midnight and push till 8. And I'll even give you a typical example as well. There was a time we were submitting a tender, and I had not done the paperwork. Alex did the paperwork, I think, throughout the night, with the view that in the morning I was traveling, and I needed to come pick the documents up, go bind them, and make sure that they are delivered that thing happened seamlessly without even him having to worry now to say, hey, if I do all this work, what if this guy doesn't wake up? What if he doesn't make it? So you have to have that, I think almost like I call it an unwritten rule, but it's almost like a tick box. It's almost like being in a relationship with a partner.
How big a component in your success was that? This culture?
A lot of it. In fact, I would argue it's a 90% contributor to it. Because I'll tell you why. There's certain skills we didn't have. There's certain skills that my partners had that I didn't have. There's certain skills that I had that my partners didn't have. But with time, you sort of standardize on those skills. But how you get to standardize on those skills is very much a cultural culture allows us to do that. So I would say 80% of it was culture, and 20% of it probably skills that we are able to close in. And again, culture dictates that, right? Because we were all had an appetite for knowledge, right? You would not have survived that environment if you were not someone who's seeking and willing to learn fast and be able to expose to risks. And we all had that. And whenever you had a shortage in skill, you needed to skill yourself up, but make it transparent to the partners. And I guess that's the testament why that partnership still exists even today. It's being able to go, it's almost like call it a team of some sort, and understanding the roles and responsibilities of the team, but willing to plug in when there's a shortage in some areas, and willing to be coached and willing to be led, sometimes leading. That's very important as a team. So there were no egos, for example. There was no one who says, no, but I'm a leader, I need to be. It was such a collaborative effort, joint effort. In fact, if you were to ask me, I enjoyed work then, because we were delivering very high quality work, involved with the clients at the coalface, but the culture was an enabler for that. You might ask me the question that says, well, was I aware that it's culture? I wasn't, I'll be honest with you. But having reflected on it now and looking at the journey we've had as partners to date, I would simply boil down a lot of that success to the culture that came through.
I want to reflect very quickly on what Keith says on Twitter, and I think it's very interesting, really referring to that conversation. I mean, the question that I asked about what is the difference between a self-employed person and a business person. And Keith says, good evening, Orbs. My understanding is that a self-employed person is a skilled individual who uses that skill and is paid for it. For example, a doctor or a lawyer. Whereas a business person is skilled in managing the skilled people and runs a system in which the skilled people are delegated into various components that create money for that individual. He continues to say that on the other hand, an entrepreneur thrives on seeking opportunities for linking businesses and business persons to self-employed people for the benefit of solving problems for lots of people. They make money as a token of appreciation and in the process become businesses by virtue of creating systems. And that's from Keith in Midrand. I'll ask you to reflect on that. But how critical in your development as a business, as Ntiyiso Consulting, together with your partners, how critical would culture have been, whether you knew it then or not? How critical would it have been? And I asked that question because somebody listening to this conversation now and saying, hey, this is an entrepreneurial conversation, and it appears that culture played a big role in the ascendance of Andisa and his partners to the point where they've got Ntiyiso Consulting, or the consulting group. And we'll talk about what the components of the business are, what the value propositions are. But I'm interested in making the person listening to us now appreciate how critical culture, those unwritten rules, those expectations of a particular work ethic, of a particular value system, of a particular attention to detail. You've just spoken about those things without it having to be something that is written down and casuistically put down as a law. How critical was it in the development of your business?
As I've mentioned, Aubrey, I would attain 80% of our success to it.
So would that mean that anybody that wants to go into business has to seriously think about the issue of culture and actively pursue it and understand it and master it?
Yeah, of course. And you see that it's not a lot of partnerships, by the way, that stand the test of time. And I can tell you more often than not, when partnership breaks, it's down to a value system which is about culture, right? If, for example, you don't have the same beliefs about money and how to manage money, you'll see that partnership will quickly disintegrate. You don't have the same belief about how work should be done and the quality that should be delivered. Other people probably will say, no, man, why are you spending so much time perfecting a paragraph, right? This thing is good enough. We'll invoice and give quickly. Whereas you say, no, but every word counts in a paragraph. And therefore, it's important that each and every word stand out by itself and be a stickler. So you become much more about quality.
Pregnant with me. Yeah.
You become much more about quality and less about just compliance and taking out reports and invoicing. So those things you'll see that they quickly take a toll on the partnerships, right? Because you'll forever be fighting about money. You'll forever be fighting about taking work. And by the way, not to say that the person who's saying, why are you nitpicking the words is wrong, by the way. He's probably saying, but we could be doing 20 of these things and when now you are busy doing one. Yep. And this is where now the issues of strategy comes in, right? That says, should we be doing one and charging more, or should we be doing many and charging less? Price, but we will come back to that. But the issues of culture are sacrosanct, Aubrey. I'll reflect on the partnerships that never really worked for me. You know, I don't like what do I call this, uncertainty in the future. So I've had one partnership, for example, where every time we had a shareholders meeting, someone will rock up with a new partner because they're looking for money. And you find out later that a guy did contribute something to the partnership, and next moment you have a new business partner that you're not sure whether you can gel. Those things happen, by the way, and I'm sure a lot of people would have experience to that. I've had partners who are very wild in nature and very confrontational in a very aggressive and not so palatable way, right? I'm not that. I'm confrontational myself,
sure.
But I still want to do that with candor and decor, because at the end of the day, you want to maintain and manage relationships.
Sure.
And you'll see that those partnerships will disintegrate because one guy is very gung-ho and a cowboy and ready to shoot everyone else, versus you're also gung-ho, but in a systematic, in a much more pragmatic and much more candid way. And again, your styles of work will start conflicting again. So those things are telltale signs that are there when partnerships. Sure, you can do. There are partnerships that are for a season. There are partnerships that are for a lifetime. I think as an entrepreneur, you need to be very clear about those and how to use them to your own ability. But culture is very important if you are building a legacy business, the one for the long haul. The one that will stand the test of time. You would need to build a very strong base in terms of culture.
Give me a call if you're a business person.
Yeah.
You run a business. You don't have to give us your name. You can be anonymous, and you've perhaps come to a place where you've discovered that the partnerships that you have in that business are not to the optimum level that they ought to be if indeed your business must go for the long haul. Yeah? You started to sense that. You started to see that. You started to see how conversations are not about the quality of the work, but rather about the remuneration or the payment that is going to come from that. Nothing wrong with payment. But if perhaps you have a value system that says, I don't want payment until I've delivered quality work, and you see that there is perhaps a disjuncture between you and your partners around issues of that nature, around issues of being forthright and honest with each other, around issues of being in a place where you have attention to detail as the kind of hallmark that or trademark that makes your work stand out. Give me a call. I'd love to hear from you, because it appears to me that, Andisa, you're saying to me that if there is no gelling at that level, if there is no connection at that level, at the place where you don't have to necessarily write it down, then you are you're heading for hiding.
Yeah. Remember, we're talking now about a business that's starting out, right?
Yeah.
And you'll see that as a business matures, or at least at the infancy, we're less about writing things down. Yeah. And that's probably one of the things I would say I would change with my entrepreneurship journey. We have to be sticklers of writing. We should be writing memos, white papers, codifying ways of doing things. Even this culture itself, writing it down so that it makes it easy to enroll the next level of stuff. I mean, when we started hiring, by the way, we hired more for expediency because the business was growing, and we did not pay a lot of attention to this cultural stuff that has made Ntiyiso to work. And we've paid growing pains for it in terms of human resource churn, in terms of, I mean, it's not a good space to be in to have to part ways with employees. And we, in fact, I stand corrected now. We've yet to fire someone because of particularly performance. It's mostly the cultural part that makes us part ways with people. We work with our people. We are a development firm, and by the way, it's one of the values that we had that became very important when we were starting out, and you'll see it in our purpose, and it's a purpose that we share as founder. That purpose of development, right? We say we empower institutions that enable Africa's development. This is how it reads now, as it is. But by the way, we tried crafting it back then, and we used very big consulting words that we even got confused. But the gist or the essence of it was there, and hence us even trying to get clarity around it, so that we are able to enroll as many people as possible. We necessitated that we take that exercise.
Did you at that stage, at the beginning of your business, understand the fact that this is a journey? I mean, what I imagine that, and comment if you can.
Yeah.
I imagine at this point of the development of the business, and with hindsight, you realize that it was a journey.
Yeah.
And a journey implies that there is going to be learnings. There's going to be successes and failures. There's going to be a process by which you imbibe certain, shall we call them values, and certain ideas and certain skills and so forth. And that if you look at yourself 18 years later, you probably find that you're very different people. Yes, still grounded in the same sort of culture, but different people in the way that you've grown, the way that you've been chiseled, in the way that you've become what you are now. Was there an understanding that this is a journey? And I ask this because I imagine that anybody that wants to create a business must understand that this is a journey.
Yeah, no, it wasn't there. In fact, I remember the conversations we were having, particularly myself having started the TV business. It was very much an opportunistic opportunity that came. But I don't think I treated it to saying, look, it's opportunistic. It was still very, very much in my mind an opportunity to start doing something and building something. Whether I'm part of it in the long haul was up for discussion, but it was never in doubt that whatever we were working on, we need to build a very solid foundation. And as we are building that solid foundation, by the way, and embarking on that journey of self-discovery, we started having conversations, right? Honest conversation, but to say, but gentlemen, what is this? We've got so many employees now. We've got this thing. What is this thing? And there's a number of, I guess, interactions as partners that we started formulating, and I think it was not up until, in fact, it's been recent that we now decided, you know what, let's take and corporatize this. But one of the key learnings, of which I know a lot of people don't value this, is taking time out as partners and having a conversation about a business. I think at that point in time, we did not call them per se strategy sessions, but we would take time to really just reflect on the business and talk about business. Because part of reflecting, you'll reflect on the growth of the business, you'll reflect on the weaknesses that are emerging, you'll reflect on the people, but you'll start reflecting on the bigger why of the business, which will then start formalizing the partnership, start formalizing the business. But those were ongoing conversations, Aubrey, from the very onset, as far as I can remember. One thing we've not been shy away of, as I've mentioned, and I would urge every business person who's actually serious about their business, is taking time off, 2-3 days off. Not doing the work, but thinking about the work that needs to be done, thinking about the people, thinking about the clients, and reflecting. It's a very
because you can get caught up in the treadmill of it all.
Absolutely. Yeah? I still get the questions now, because we have our strategic getaways 4 times a year. Everyone will be like, yes, you guys, what do you talk about so much in a strategy, right? And it's difficult telling people this is what we talk about, but I guess it's more the reflection of the maturity of maybe the parties that are around what it takes to reflect on the business. I mean, reflecting on a business is a very deep spiritual exercise, right? It's not something you can think about in a car. Of course, I think about the business in the car, and some sporadic ideas will come. Of course, sometimes, some inspiration. I'll write stuff down, and so will the partners. I'll be reading something. We've got a Twitter thing now that we'll share the thing. So there's always the flow of ideas, right? But those flow of ideas are just that, flow of ideas. You do need a session where you concretize these things, and they become decisions that influence how you then run the business. And until you take time away to just reflect on sales, reflect on marketing, reflect on the strategy itself, the stuff that we
reflect on about. What do we do?
What do we do? Reflect on yourselves as partners to say, but how do we contribute to growing the business? That's a very crucial. I would think after culture, the second thing that's sacrosanct is just taking time to reflect on, even if it's a weekend, to take the Saturday and the Sunday. If you can afford the money, go lock yourself in a bush. But all you do about is just dream about your business. Okay, look back, obviously, and say, if I had everything the way I wanted to be, how would this business look like? Okay, where am I currently now, and what will it take for each and every component of my business to be there, whether it be people or process?
I want to take some calls. 011-883-0702. Andisa Ramavhunga is my guest. He's Chief Group Advisor at Ntiyiso Consulting, and a lot of you ask me, what is Ntiyiso Consulting? He'll tell us in a few moments' time. But really just looking at the journey of entrepreneurship from being self-employed to corporatizing. In this particular case, we'll talk a little bit about that. It's important, folks. These notions, these ideas are critical. They are critical in us getting to a place where we are real impactors of an economy, and not just passive impactors of an economy. I'm not saying that those of us who work, who have a job, are just passive, because you're not passive, you're working. But I'm saying that there's a next level here. And then there's another next level. There's levels at which we need to start impacting this economy. Tomorrow, by the way, the Minister of Finance is going to be giving the budget speech, the much awaited for budget speech. And we need to start being real contributors. Now I'm going to get into trouble when somebody says, but of course we are real contributors. But I'm talking about at a business level. Let me speak to Piri in Alex. Good evening to you, Piri.
Hi, good evening, Bro Ops and Mr. Ramavhunga. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for calling, Piri.
Bro Ops, I have been listening to these conversations that you've been having with Mr. Andisa there since they started, and sure. I really am grateful for the knowledge that you guys have imparted. I am an aspiring entrepreneur. I wish to see myself being an entrepreneur, running businesses in future. And I have to say that, ever since you guys have been having this conversation, I've been trying to put, ideas together, putting the puzzles together. I've got some sort of a business plan that I've been trying to put together on what I want to do, because I'm not really liking the office work that I'm doing, so I want to do things on my own. So I just want to say I'm really grateful for this knowledge that you guys have been putting out in the public eye here. Maybe I just wanted to ask, in terms of partners, how exactly do you choose, partners, people that you want to work with, and how can I go about? Because I've got a couple of guys that I kind of want to work with, but I'm still not sure if we can be able to work together and really succeed together. And I suppose that is important, that you have partners that you have the same goal with. And also the issue of culture that Mr. Andisa has actually alluded to. How does one really cultivate that kind of culture, that everyone can actually buy into, and, see to it that the work that is done is actually done, and done successfully. Thanks.
Piri, thanks very much for that question. Much appreciated. Is it that deliberate? Do you choose it, or does it sometimes just happen to you?
Yeah, look, for me, it has been trial and error. And I can tell you, even to date, it's still very trial and error, because it's more expediency that leads you to partners more than it's not a recruitment process, if you know what I mean. Although I'll argue where I am currently, sometimes it is a bit of a recruitment process, but it's more expediency, because you're trying to access maybe some opportunity, or you're trying to access some skill, you're trying to complement some skill, and it comes with you having not have the latitude of nilly-willy choosing who and who, because sometimes if you've got a partner who's willing to complement you without getting paid and taking the risk, there aren't a lot of partners who are like that. But I always say that you take it project by project. Just make the first invoice and see how things are. It's like any relationship, I guess. Partnership is exactly that. And that's why I use the word partner, not supplier, because you could argue that if the business is yours and you're enrolling someone into the business and they're offering a skill, they could be a supplier, right? But it's a partnership, because there's some level of shared risk, and there's some level of leniency and latitude that you allow yourselves in. That's why you get into a partnership and not probably try to find money and fund it. So yeah, it's tricky. It's a trial and error. I would say don't formalize it up until it becomes very clear. Take it as it goes. And you can only learn. And it's great once you've learned. I mean, one of the things we've actually done with, even now as a business, we have a framework that we use to vet partners. That would look at obviously the business, it will look at how they operate, where they are, but more importantly, look at the cultural. We've set ourselves a set of values that we want to test with the partners. And that's, by the way, it's a function of hindsight, but you need to find those deal breakers for yourself. And those are the deal breakers you need to then document. I'm a stickler for writing stuff. If you ask me, Aubrey, the difference between a businessman and a self-employed guy, the businessman is the stickler for codifying stuff, because that's what makes you scale the business. You must write down that culture thing, whether you use it to enroll, to recruit people who will be working in the business, or using it to get partners. Write that down and make it a Bible. And I'll tell you why that's important. The day that you are not there, someone will be able to pick it up and be able to use the same framework or the same tool to enroll the next person when you are not even involved in the process. This is what it takes to scale the business and make sure that the business runs when you are not even there.
Debza asks, good evening, Raobs and team. Please kindly ask our guest on how do you write an agreement letter with your partner, and essentials that must be in the document, asks Tebogo.
Yeah, he's saying an agreement, and I'm trying to rush out. The moment you get into agreements, that's not really a partnership anymore. And I'm not saying people should shy away from governing stuff. And I mean, we have a shareholders agreement now as partners, but I can tell you it's something that we did very, very late in the business. A lot of stuff we did was through a shake of a hand, and hence this process that says get to know people before you commit to them, because if that becomes the way you want to govern it through law, trust me, you'd spend a lot of time involving lawyers in making your relationship work, and that's never hardly a partnership. You might as well just relegate them to becoming normal service providers. But I would say I've honored agreements, by the way, written by hand. In fact, I remember I was sitting in a restaurant one time, and one of my ex-partners made me, which I still regret, by the way, sign something written on paper. But I honored it, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the partnership that matters, and less about if you agree on the spirit of how to do things, and you agree on the spirit of shared value and how to accrue and split that value. I think you then are in the right way. But as that said, I mean, people are unscrupulous out there. That's why I would argue that I think take your time, learn and get to know people project by project, and start formalizing stuff as partnership once you are probably in your third or fourth iteration.
It sounds to me like a lot of this at the beginning is very intuitive. Yeah? It sounds to me like there's a very strong intuitional sort of approach to how you make decisions in the beginning of the business. What should inform that intuition?
You're asking me very difficult questions. Because it's almost like asking me
building account.
How does gut feel formulates within my body. I guess we are different, and I don't want to. I can tell you how I do it. Have I come to regret it at some point in time? Of course, I have. But these things are trial and error, Aubrey, and I guess, like I'm saying, it's a journey. A lot of, at least what I would argue with people right now is document each and everything. And when I say document, I'm not talking legal stuff. Have a playbook of some sort, whether it's matters of strategy, it's matters of culture, it's matters of people. And it does not need to be a fancy thing. It could be a journal where you just record things as they come and how they make you feel and how would you have done them differently. Just record as your own way of learning, which is in consulting we call it a playbook, but it could be a playbook about your business and how you made the decisions and what led to you making the decisions, and the aim is to learn from it as much as you can.
Octavia Mamabolo says, good evening, Aubrey and your guest. I've been running my logistics business for a while now. Unfortunately, it's a sole ownership. I have had a few requests to partner, but the expectations from prospective partners have always been centered around immediate financial benefits, even before any amount of time is spent in the business. One of the major problems we have is instant gratification. Oh, Octavia, I hear you, man. This is a very real challenge. I would love to bring in one or two people. I believe more brains make the work light, but I think the shared value that your guest is talking about is critical. Is so critical, says Octavia. And thank you so much for this topic, and that is from Esther in Irene. The reason why I've spent so much time on the issue of culture and the intuitive sort of connection that happened and so forth is because I always find that when we speak entrepreneurship and business in South Africa, we want to speak in very black and white terms. And it is at that inceptional stage, it's that at that beginning stage, that the black and white stuff doesn't really exist. It's created by the intuitive stuff. It's created by the gravitational forces of people who have the same value system.
Yeah.
And I think that what this calls for is a lot of introspection. A lot of introspection of understanding not just what you do and the skills you require, but who you are. So that you can be able to understand what it is that you are attracted to and what you are repelled by at a level of culture.
Yeah.
And this conversation, in the conversation around business entrepreneurship, is woefully neglected. Woefully neglected. If culture, value system, those unwritten things count for 90% of whether or not the business is going to succeed or not, I think that we spend way too much time talking about percentages, this legal principle, and that, without focusing on who are we in order to make this project work. As we close, comment on that.
Yeah, Aubrey, and I think you're asking a question because I guess most of our business exposure is once these businesses have grown and have become the mammoth. Yeah, of course. When you are there, a lot of people have gone through this journey that we are talking about. A lot of codification would have done. A lot of teething issues, the trial and errors would have done. They are matured. They practically, I mean, if a business gets to 30, 40, 50 plus years, it has done its journey, it has done its maturity, and it's probably very clear, and that's why it gets too black and white. But at the inception, it's quite important that we reflect on what you've just mentioned now. And I keep on saying, and I said it again today, that when we do reflection, it's a deep spiritual thing. And by the way, that calls into question the being that you are. And you cannot separate that, particularly when it's at the start of the business, because we are shaping the identities of the business through the personalities of the owners.
How do people get in touch with you?
Yep, they can write to me, info@ntiyisoconsulting.co.za.
Lots of people wanting to find out what is Ntiyiso Consulting. Next time we get together, we'll be talking about their business, but we continue with this journey.